Hello and welcome to a Lakers Theory podcast, live again right after a game. And if you cannot tell by the sound of my voice, it was not a happy game. I am Shane Jackson. Joined with me, as always, is Austin Case. We are sad yet again. And again, it's because of the Suns. Suns win 115 to 105. And honestly, I think most of this podcast will be devoted to non basketball topics. That's how much of a nightmare tonight was. I have a lot of thoughts, and we'll get into all of them. But I wanted to give you the floor first, Austin. Fresh off the Lakers falling to 0-2 on the year, what is your main takeaway from tonight's loss?
Um, my main takeaway is this team looked very bad today. It's game two. They haven't had a lot of time with live game action together. Even in the preseason, they weren't together a lot. So I'm not going to look too much into this because of that aspect, but it was a bad game. I think there were some non-basketball things going on. It seemed like a few guys were chirping at each other. That's not good. In any point in any game, but especially this one when you're kind of getting your butt kicked and you're chirping at each other. There's going to be some stuff there to think about, but for the most part, I feel like it was just a bad game. Again, they went through a long stretch where the defense was just terrible, and I do want to give credit to the Suns though, because I feel like they were knocking down a lot of shots, and I don't feel like the defense was poor on every shot they had, but it just seemed like guys were getting lost defensively. The Suns were getting a bunch of wide open shots where guys just kind of stood there, not taking credit that they just should at least attempt to close out. So it was a lot of poor defensive play today, and I feel like that's bad moving forward because that is a weakness that everyone knows this team's going to have, and it showed tonight.
Yeah. First off, you mentioned the Suns, and I feel like because this is Lakers podcast, we don't really talk about the opponents enough. Suns obviously are a good basketball team. They won the West last year for a reason. They beat the Lakers in the playoffs last year for a reason, and they are likely a contender again this year for a reason. And they were good, and they're good tonight. So make sure we give our credit to them as well. But we always tend to focus on the Lakers aspect because obviously we're Lakers fans, and that is why people are listening to this podcast. I went ahead and compiled a list of all the things that happened in this game that I hope I got the entire list together. But here's what all took place in this game. Russ rocked the baby in the first quarter. Devin Booker returned the favor in the third quarter. Frank Vogel got the technical foul after that non-charge call in the second quarter, I believe it was. There was the Dwight Anthony Davis scuffle on the bench in the second quarter, which will be played on literally every single talk show for the next 3 days. And Ken Bazemore had the technical on that non-travel call after he was angry with the official not calling a travel. LeBron never came up the floor on offense after that block attempt where he got, I think, mostly armed. And then he proceeded to jaw with the Suns bench and just didn't come up the floor. Very little effort by LeBron, especially late in that game. Then there was Carmelo and JaVale McGee jawing. I think that was in the fourth quarter. Maybe it was third quarter. And then there was the double technical on Anthony Davis and DeAndre Ayton in the fourth quarter. Not to mention the Lakers clawed back into it to make it a single-digit game with over a minute left in the fourth quarter somehow. But yeah, that I listed all those things, and those were non-basketball things. And I know most people are going to focus on that aspect of it as well, but I think we should because I think it begs the question that I have for this podcast and the entire premise of the show, and I think it's the title in the show is where do the Lakers go from here, right? Like 0-2, when you factor in who they were playing, is that not that big of a deal. The Golden State Warriors, the Phoenix Suns, two teams who could contend for the Western Conference this year. When you consider that, it's fine being 0-2, especially since the Lakers are a team with a lot of new pieces and they're trying to fit them all together. It's the way they're going to 0-2 in an embarrassing fashion tonight against the Suns with everything that happened that was non-basketball related. And so I think my biggest concern, my biggest question for this team is how do they respond from this? Now, maybe the fourth quarter was a glimpse of that. I think it's more the Suns just gave up, or maybe not gave up, but they put their foot off the gas and like they weren't really trying, and the Lakers took advantage of it. But my question is, are the Lakers going to start making excuses and blaming everybody else, or are they going to come together and show some sort of kind of response and figure this thing out? I think with all the anger they had at the officials, like I have a feeling it might be more of the former. But if it is the latter, then maybe there is still hope with what this team is capable of doing. So I guess I rambled a lot, and I don't really know what I decided. But Austin, what do you think? Where do you think the Lakers go from here?
Well, I honestly don't see how it could get worse. Like they they blew the game against Golden State. Essentially, they had that stretch where it just fell apart for them, and then they couldn't come back. The Suns here, they were playing well in the first quarter, and then the Suns just put their foot on the Lakers' throat, and they fell behind. Like, you're down 30 points with entering the fourth quarter. Like, there's not a lot you can do. I personally, as a fan, feel like the officiating was terrible. I'm looking at the box score, like the personal foul total, like it's close enough where you couldn't see a huge discrepancy. Free throws, Lakers shot one more free throw, so it's hard to blame the officiating there. But I think there were some key missed calls or calls that probably shouldn't have been made. But that's every game. So I can't use that against a 30-point deficit because that's not the whole story. So, they have to get better from here. They've lost 2 games. I guess it could get worse. They could lose 3, but it's the beginning of the season. I know the guys commentating the game, they were like, why is LeBron and AD and these guys still out here? And I was just like, well, they've only played, 3, maybe 4 games if you include, the preseason. And so like these guys need that time to play together. Still, it doesn't matter if you're down 20 points or not. They need to be out there on the court playing. And it started to click a little bit there at the end, but the game was too far out of reach. It really wasn't going to matter if they couldn't make a stop on defense, which honestly, that was what stopped them from really closing the gap there.
Yeah, I actually liked Frank Vogel keeping his stars in the game there to close it out. Honestly, like I wouldn't have been against it if he was just like, obviously we're not watching interviews right now. I wouldn't be against it. He was just like, yeah, I was mad at them. I wanted to prove a point or whatever. Wanted to make them play it out. I wouldn't have been against it and to like teach them a lesson. But no, I think so. I already mentioned what was the fourth quarter score? It was Lakers 38, Suns 21, and so most of that is probably the Suns saying, kind of sleepwalking there in the fourth quarter and be like, hey, we got this in the bag, and the Lakers are like, oh, let's do this. But I do think what led to some of those moments is something the Lakers can tap into, right? So they were playing a little bit smaller. You could see them kind of like scrambling around on defense and putting a lot of ball pressure out there. And then really the big thing was getting out in transition. And that is what this team is supposed to be good at. When Russ came here, that was one of the first things we said in a positive way about Russ and what this Lakers team could be is how good they could be in transition. And I think you saw a glimpse of that in the fourth quarter. This team just pushing in transition. And I think that could be maybe the identity of this team is is playing more kind of pressury on the defense side, leading to maybe easier buckets on the offensive in transition. And I don't know. To me, I think that is something worth looking into for the Lakers. Now, obviously, the schedule sets up nicely for the Lakers moving forward to like really turn this. I mean, there's no panic button here after 2 games, but really to like kind of piece this thing together and gel a little bit. But maybe tapping into what they did in the fourth quarter is the way to go.
I mean, they, the performance can't get worse. I honestly like I just don't see how they can get worse. And they have a pretty friendly schedule coming up. I feel like it would be tough opening the season with these 2 games. I feel like there's a lot of heat left over from that first round playoff game with the Suns last year. So I feel like that is where a lot of the, Carmelo and JaVale, even though they weren't on the teams, there's still some just bad blood there. So I don't care about the, them jawing at each other. That's just part of basketball. But
yeah,
the jawing with teammates, that's not going to be good. They're going to have to get that solved quick. And honestly, they showed the video a couple times, and I don't think it is got elevated to what they are trying to make it seem. I mean, obviously they're heated. They were getting their butt kicked. So naturally everyone's going to be a little chirpy and on edge. But I mean, if that stuff does carry over, there's probably going to be issues. I don't see Dwight being on this team at the end of the season if he's kind of getting this negative attention and jawing with Anthony Davis and stuff. So that could be something to keep an eye on. But that just kind of speaks to all the different type of characters that are on this team. They're just going to have to make it work. And I think they will. They just need more time.
I am really fascinated. Again, the post-game interviews are happening as we do this pod, but I am fascinated to hear, the response or maybe the explanation to what that scuffle was. Because I agree, there's a chance that it's just, you're 2 competitive players who were in a very competitive mindset and things escalated between them and maybe they were fine after. I don't know. The thing that is concerning that kind of led to the early question I had was that is, as you mentioned, all the personalities on this team, right? It could escalate for the season, if the Lakers let that happen. If they were started making excuses and pointing fingers at all these players, that locker room could break apart really easily. And I think that's what you were getting at with the big personalities. And that is the concern. And that is why, that video we played for the next few days, that is why everyone on Twitter will have a take from that clip, is because that is the worst case scenario for this team, is that situation getting out of control and this season, kind of going off the rails before it really started. Getting back to what I was saying about the transition, the offense has been, I don't know. That's one of the areas that I thought the Lakers would be better at. But they are settling for a lot of mid-range shots right now. I tweeted about it at halftime, but their final tally ended up being 8 for 29 on mid-range shots. When you compare that to 11 of 23 at the rim. And honestly, they only really got to the rim in the fourth quarter. That was, I think, I'll have to look at the splits, but I think most of their, rim shots came near in the fourth quarter. So it doesn't feel like the Lakers are playing optimally on the offensive end. Which is really the big concerning part for me through 2 games. Is I think they're settling for a lot of these mid-range shots, these late shot clock shots that really don't have a much of a chance. And to me, I more so than the actual defensive miscues, because some of that is maybe that effort energy that we were mentioning earlier. I think it's the offense that they don't seem to have a plan, and it is only 2 games, but. That is probably the most concerning part to me through 2 games. So, I mean, do you have anything else you want to get into? I mean, Memphis is on Sunday. I assume the Lakers will win that game. Maybe not a fair assumption at this point. And they'll start piling up some of these wins together. It may not look pretty, and we may come on this podcast analyzing it and critiquing it, similar to how we would be with a loss. But I don't know. I expect more wins to start coming than what we've seen so far.
Yeah, definitely. Like I feel Memphis is a winnable game. Like I think, and I hope this doesn't carry over like season long, but just a quick thing that I've noticed is like the Warriors and the Suns, they're pretty physical defensively. And that kind of shuts the Lakers down a little bit. It kind of forces them to take like just jump shots, like not always great jump shots and stuff like that. So, if that's kind of how this team is going to respond with physical defensive teams, then like we might be in trouble. So there's definitely a lot to figure out still. I mean, they've had 2 games that matter. To somewhat of a level. So there's still a lot for them to figure out. And, they're probably still working on things that we just can't think of, honestly. So I have to mention this because it's in my nature. Austin Reeves, he's played 12 minutes. He's already made 2 more shots from deep than Russ has. So I have to mention that.
He's gonna get more minutes. I mean, he played pretty well there in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I was telling my wife Mallory, I was
You're
like,
still up?
Yeah, she watched. Well, she didn't watch the game with me. She was on her phone the whole time. But, but I was like, I don't know where Reeves is in comparison with Caruso, their rookie years, but I feel like his defensive effort is really good. Like I actually thought he played defense really well when he was out there. And also he's like, I feel like he's a good offensive threat. Probably more of an offensive threat than Caruso was. So I'm like, we're getting this mix of him where like he could develop defense. If he can keep developing defensively, he could be a really strong role player, kind of like Caruso was.
And there is your wife commenting on live here on the Lakers Theory podcast. Remember, you can comment live if you're watching this live with us after big games at Lakers Theory. We're on all social medias that way. Did you see Caruso get the MVP chance?
They were giving Caruso MVP
in Chicago. It was late in the, or I don't know actually when it was in the game, but they chanted MVP while he's at the free throw line. It was incredible. It was amazing. I think he scored like 6 points, but he was getting MVP chance. It was awesome. I forgot so much happened in this game. I forgot DeAndre Jordan started again for the Lakers, and that was like not okay. Like, obviously that he can't be the starting center moving forward.
No, he played 10 minutes too. And honestly, I don't remember him being out there after like the 8-minute mark in the first quarter. Like I don't remember ever seeing him again. So yeah, I don't know. They were fairly small a lot. Like Jordan played 10 minutes. Dwight only played 9 minutes. That's a fairly small lineup for most of the game. So but they still got stuff to figure out. They'll get it done, though. I have faith that the elder men of this team can rally the troops, and they'll get it figured out.
Well, Austin is optimistic. That means we all have to be optimistic as Lakers fans because he is always pessimistic. So that's where we're going to end it. I don't know. I don't know where the Lakers go from here. They're 0-2. I hope wins start coming. Otherwise, this podcast is just going to be super sad to do on a regular basis. We may do one on Sunday. We may not. Who knows? But you can follow us on all social medias to find out when we do at Lakers Theory on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. He's Austin Case. I'm Shane Jackson. Thank you so much for listening, Lakers fans. And hopefully we see a win the next time we're on the show.